Clara's fingers were numb when she finally stopped running. Snow clung to her torn dress, and blood, her own, dripped onto the frozen ground outside Blackwater, Colorado. Behind her, somewhere in that blizzard, her stepfather's men were still hunting. She had two choices: freeze to death in this storm, or knock on the door of the only man in town willing to take her in. The man they called the Beast. The cowboy nobody dared to touch. She chose the Beast. Before we continue, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel and follow Clara's story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you how Clara Brennan ended up on that doorstep. Mug. 3 days earlier, Clara had stepped off the stagecoach in Blackwater with nothing but a carpetbag and $17 to her name. The driver tipped his hat as he handed down her luggage. "You got family here, miss?" "No." "Friends?" "No." He frowned, glancing at the bruise she'd tried to hide beneath her bonnet. "Then why Blackwater?" Clara took her bag and stepped back. "Because it's far enough." The stagecoach pulled away, leaving her alone on the frozen street. December wind cut through her thin coat like a knife. She'd sold her good wool cloak back in Kansas City to buy the ticket. Blackwater wasn't much to look at. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple. Maybe 40 buildings in all huddled together against the Colorado mountains like they were afraid of the wilderness beyond. Clara started walking toward the general store. She needed work. She needed shelter. She needed to disappear before Elijah found her. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. Warmth hit her face and she nearly wept from the relief of it. "Help you." The woman behind the counter was perhaps 60, with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. "I'm looking for work," Clara said. "Anything. Cleaning, cooking, mending. I'm good with a needle." The woman's eyes traveled over Clara's appearance. The worn dress. The bruise. The desperate set of her jaw. "Ain't much work in Blackwater for a woman alone. There must be something. Hotel might need a maid. Pays poor, but it's honest." The woman paused. "Or there's the notice." "What notice?" The woman jerked her chin toward a board near the window. "Been up there 6 months. Nobody's answered it yet." Clara crossed to the board. Among the wanted posters and land advertisements, a single handwritten notice caught her eye. "Seeking housekeeper. Room board and fair wage provided. Thornton Ranch, 8 miles north. Ask for Samuel Thornton." "Why hasn't anyone answered?" Clara asked. The shop fell silent. Clara turned to find the woman staring at her with something like pity. "You ain't from around here, so you wouldn't know." The woman lowered her voice, though they were alone. "Samuel Thornton is the man they call the Beast of Blackwater." "Beast? Been here near 10 years now. Lives alone on that ranch, never comes to town except for supplies. Never takes off his coat, not even in summer. Never lets anyone close." Clara's fingers touched the notice. "Why do they call him a beast?" "Because of what's under his clothes." The woman shuddered. "Doc Whitmore saw it once years back when Thornton got thrown from a horse. Said his whole body is covered in scars. Burns looked like. Said it was the most horrible thing he'd ever seen." "Burns don't make a man a beast." "That ain't all." The woman leaned closer. "Before he came here, he was a bounty hunter. Tracked men for money. And there was a fire. A whole family burned alive because of something he did. 3 people dead, including a child." Clara's stomach turned. "He killed them. That's what folks say. He came here after bought that ranch, shut himself away." The woman shook her head. "Some say he screams at night, like he's being burned alive himself over and over. My nephew rode past his property once and heard it. Said it sounded like a soul in hell." Clara looked at the notice again. Room and board, fair wage, 8 miles from town, 8 miles from anyone who might recognize her. "How do I get to this ranch?" The woman's mouth fell open. "Girl, didn't you hear a word I said?" "I heard." "He's dangerous. He's a killer. He's..." He's offering work. Clara pulled the notice from the board. And I need work. You'd rather live with a beast than take honest work at the hotel. Clara thought of Elijah, of his hands around her throat, of the way he'd smiled when he told her she belonged to him. Ma'am, she said quietly, I've already lived with a beast. At least this one might leave me alone. She bought supplies with her remaining money. Dried meat crackers, a canteen. The woman who finally introduced herself as Margaret Hayes tried one more time to dissuade her. The road north is treacherous this time of year. Snow's coming. You'll freeze before you get halfway. Then I'll walk fast. Child. Margaret grabbed Clara's wrist. Whatever you're running from, it can't be worse than what's waiting at that ranch. Clara gently pulled free. You'd be surprised. She started walking at noon. The road north wound through frozen fields and scattered pines, climbing steadily toward the mountains. By mid-afternoon, the sky had turned gray, and the first flakes of snow began to fall. Clara walked faster. By dusk, the snow was coming down hard. Her boots were soaked through her fingers, numb despite her thin gloves. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. 8 miles, Margaret had said. Clara had no way to know how far she'd come. The wind picked up driving snow into her face until she could barely see the road. She stumbled, caught herself, kept walking. If she stopped, she would die. She knew that with absolute certainty. She was going to die anyway. The thought came quietly, almost peacefully. She was lost in a blizzard miles from shelter, and no one knew where she was. She would freeze to death on this road, and Elijah would never find her. Maybe that was a kind of freedom. She fell. Her knees hit frozen ground, and she didn't have the strength to get up. The snow was so thick now she couldn't see her own hands. This is how it ends, she thought, not with Elijah's hands around my throat, but with cold. She closed her eyes, and then she heard it, the sound of hooves. Clara forced her eyes open. Through the swirling white, she saw a dark shape approaching, a horse, a rider. Hello! Her voice came out as a croak. Please, help! The rider dismounted. Heavy boots crunched through the snow toward her. Please, she whispered again. Strong hands gripped her arms, lifting her from the ground as if she weighed nothing. She caught a glimpse of a face, hard jaw, dark eyes, a scar cutting across one cheek before her vision blurred. What the hell are you doing out here? The voice was rough, angry. Thornton Ranch, she managed. Looking for Samuel Thornton. The hands on her arms tightened. You found him. Clara's last thought before darkness took her was that Margaret had been wrong about one thing. The beast of Blackwater had found her first. She woke to warmth. For a moment, Clara didn't know where she was. She was lying on something soft, covered with heavy blankets, and a fire crackled somewhere nearby. Then memory returned. The blizzard. The fall. The rider. She sat up too fast, and her head spun. Easy. The voice came from across the room. You've been unconscious for 2 hours. Clara's eyes adjusted to the firelight. She was in a cabin, small but clean, with a stone fireplace and shelves lined with books. And sitting in a chair by the door, as far from her as possible, was a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a heavy coat, despite the warmth of the fire. His dark hair was shot through with gray at the temples, and his face was hard-weathered with that single scar cutting across his right cheek. But it was his eyes that caught her. Pale blue, almost silver in the firelight, and filled with a wariness that bordered on fear. Mr. Thornton, she said. You know my name. His voice was flat. Who are you? Clara Brennan. I came about the notice, the one in town. Something flickered in those pale eyes. That notice has been up for 6 months. Nobody's answered it. I'm answering it now. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Even in the dim light, Clara noticed how he kept his distance, how he positioned himself with his back to the wall. The position's been filled. By whom? Doesn't matter. You need to leave. Clara pushed back the blankets and tried to stand. Her legs buckled and she caught herself on the edge of the bed. Leave? She laughed, the sound bitter. Mr. Thornton, I nearly died getting here. There's a blizzard outside, I have no horse, and I have nowhere else to go. That's not my concern. Then why did you save me? The question stopped him. He stood frozen by the window, shoulders rigid. Should have left you in the snow, he muttered. But you didn't. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Wind howled against the cabin walls. Finally, Samuel Thornton turned to face her. In the full light of the fire, Clara could see more details now, the way his coat was buttoned to his throat, the gloves on his hands despite being indoors. One night, he said. You stay until the storm passes, then you go back to town. And if I don't want to go back to town, I don't care what you want. This is my land, my rules. Clara should have been frightened. This man was dangerous, everyone said so. He was a killer, a beast, a monster. But when she looked at him, all she saw was someone trying very hard to disappear. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror. Why don't you want me here, Mr. Thornton? Because I don't want anyone here. That's not a reason. His jaw tightened. It's the only reason you're going to get. He moved toward the door, still keeping that careful distance between them. There's food in the pantry, water in the barrel by the stove. The outhouse is 20 yards east. He paused with his hand on the latch. Don't come outside until the storm passes. Where are you going? The barn. I sleep there. In this weather. Something almost like a smile crossed his face. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I've survived worse, Miss Brennan. Lock the door behind me. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the swirling snow. Clara sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, listening to the storm rage outside. Then she stood slowly this time, and began to explore her temporary prison. The cabin was sparse, but well maintained. A single bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area with a cast-iron stove. The bookshelves surprised her, dozens of volumes, many with worn spines that suggested frequent reading. No photographs, no personal items, nothing that spoke of a life beyond mere existence. She found bread and dried meat in the pantry, ate mechanically, then returned to the window. Through gaps in the swirling snow, she could see the outline of a barn perhaps 50 yards away. He was out there, in that cold, by choice. What kind of man chose to freeze rather than share a warm cabin? The answer came to her slowly, pieced together from Margaret's gossip and her own observations. A man who was afraid. Not of her, of himself. Clara touched the bruise on her cheek, hidden beneath her bonnet. She knew something about fear, about running, about hiding from what you'd become. Maybe that was why she wasn't afraid of Samuel Thornton. She recognized him. The storm lasted 3 days. Clara spent them alone in the cabin, watching the snow pile against the windows, rationing the food in the pantry. Samuel Thornton came once each day, always at dawn, always staying only long enough to drop off firewood and check that she was alive. He never came inside. On the first morning, Clara tried to speak with him through the door. Mr. Thornton, this is ridiculous. You'll catch your death out there. Been in colder. At least let me cook you something warm. No need. I'm not helpless, you know. I can earn my keep. A long pause. Storm should break tomorrow. Then you go. The door closed. On the second morning, she didn't try to talk. Just watched through the window as he stacked wood on the porch, his movements efficient despite the cold. She noticed he favored his left side, moved stiffly like a man carrying old wounds. Burns, Margaret had said. His whole body. Clara thought about the fire that had killed 3 people. The child. What kind of man lives with that? On the third morning, the storm finally broke. Clara woke to silence, the absence of wind and pale sunlight streaming through the frost-covered windows. She was dressed and ready when Samuel appeared at the door. Road should be passable, he said without greeting. I'll take you to town. I'm not going to town. His expression didn't change, but she saw his hands clench at his sides. Miss Brennan. I need work. You need a housekeeper. That notice has been up for 6 months because no one else will come here. She lifted her chin. I will. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Those pale eyes searched her face looking for something: fear, disgust, pity. Clara made sure he found none of those things. Why? He finally asked. Why would you stay? Clara thought about lying, making up some story about adventure or charity or Christian duty. Instead, she told the truth. Because I'm running from someone, and this is the last place he'd ever look for me. Something shifted in Samuel's expression. Not softening exactly, but a kind of recognition. Running from who? Does it matter? If someone's going to come to my ranch looking for trouble? Yes. Clara hesitated. Then, my stepfather. He wants me back. I won't go. Wants you back, why? She couldn't say it. Couldn't form the words about Elijah's hands, his breath, the way he looked at her like property. But Samuel seemed to understand anyway. He hurt you, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you think hiding here will keep you safe? I think being 8 miles from town in the home of a man everyone's afraid of might give me time. Time to figure out what to do next. Samuel's jaw worked. He stared at her for a long moment, conflict plain on his face. Then he stepped back from the door. 1 month, he said. Trial period. You cook, you clean, you don't ask questions. In exchange, you get room board and $20 at the end. 30. His eyebrows rose. I'm a good cook, Clara said, and I can mend anything. $30. For the first time, something almost like respect flickered in those pale eyes. 25. Final offer. Done. She extended her hand. Samuel looked at it like she'd offered him a snake. Miss Brennan, I don't... It's how deals are sealed where I come from, Mr. Thornton. He stared at her outstretched hand. She could see him wrestling with something: fear, reluctance, a desperate kind of longing. Finally, slowly, he reached out. Even through his glove, she could feel the tremor in his hand. The contact lasted barely a second before he pulled away. The rules, he said, voice rougher than before. You don't enter the barn. You don't touch my things. You don't ask about my past. And you... What about me? What are your rules for yourself, Mr. Thornton? He frowned. I don't understand. You sleep in the barn. You won't come inside when I'm here. You wear those gloves every moment I've seen you. Clara met his gaze steadily. You're afraid of something, and I want to know it won't hurt me. The directness of it seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment his careful mask slipped, and she saw something raw beneath pain, loneliness, a shame so deep it had become part of him. I won't hurt you, he said quietly. I've never hurt a woman in my life. Then what are you hiding from? He looked away. Some things are better left buried, Miss Brennan. Clara. What? If I'm going to live here, you might as well call me Clara. Another long pause. Then so quietly she almost missed it. Samuel. It wasn't an answer to her question, but it was something. The first week passed in careful routine. Clara rose at dawn, started the fire-prepared breakfast. Samuel appeared at precisely 7, ate quickly at the far end of the table, and was gone by 7:30 to work the ranch. She cleaned, mended, organized, trying to make the sparse cabin feel less like a prison and more like a home. He returned at dusk, ate dinner with the same silent efficiency, and retreated to the barn before full dark. They barely spoke. But Clara watched. She couldn't help it. There were too many mysteries wrapped in that tall, scarred man. She noticed how he always positioned himself with his back to a wall, how he startled at sudden sounds, how his hands shook when he thought she wasn't looking. She noticed the scars that crept above his collar sometimes when he moved a certain way, twisted, mottled skin that told of fire and agony. She noticed that he never ever took off his gloves. On the 8th day, something changed. Clara was hanging laundry on the line outside the first clear day since her arrival when she heard shouting from the barn. No, not shouting, screaming. She dropped the sheet and ran. The barn doors were closed but not locked. Clara threw them open and plunged into the dim interior, heart pounding. "Samuel, Samuel!" She found him in the back corner, collapsed against a hay bale, his whole body shaking. His eyes were open, but unseeing, fixed on something only he could see. "No," he gasped. "No, please the child. I have to let me. Samuel." Clara dropped to her knees beside him. "Samuel, look at me." He didn't respond. His hands clawed at his chest, tearing at his shirt like he was trying to rip something away. "It's burning," he choked. "Can't you smell it? It's burning. They're burning, I can't." Without thinking, Clara grabbed his face between her hands. "Samuel Thornton, look at me right now." His eyes snapped to hers. Wild, terrified, lost. "You're in your barn," Clara said firmly. "It's December. There's no fire. There's snow on the ground. Can you feel my hands?" He blinked. His breathing was ragged, his skin ice cold, despite the sweat on his brow. "Clara." "Yes, I'm here. You're safe." "The fire." "There is no fire. Not anymore." Something broke in his expression. His hands came up to cover hers, pressing them harder against his face, like she was the only real thing in a world of ghosts. "I couldn't save them," he whispered. "I tried. I went back in. But the smoke, the flames, and she was screaming, the little girl was screaming, and I couldn't—" His voice cracked. Clara felt wetness against her palms and realized with a shock that this hard, closed-off man was crying. "I couldn't save them." Clara didn't know the whole story. Didn't know if what Margaret had said was true, if Samuel was responsible for the fire, or just a witness to it. But she knew grief when she saw it. She knew guilt. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "You don't know that. I know you're still carrying it, after all these years. That tells me something. It tells you I'm a coward, that I ran, that I hid here instead of facing what I did. It tells me you're human." Samuel's hands tightened on hers. His eyes, red-rimmed and raw, searched her face. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Clara thought of Elijah, of real monsters, of the difference between a man who hurt others for pleasure and a man who hurt himself for penance. "Because you're not the one I need to fear." She stayed with him until the shaking stopped, until his breathing steadied, and the ghosts retreated back to wherever they lived when he wasn't dreaming. Then slowly she helped him to his feet. "Come inside," she said. "You're frozen. I'll make coffee." "Clara." "I'm not asking, Samuel. I'm telling." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she'd arrived, he followed her into the cabin. They sat at the table, hands wrapped around warm cups, the fire crackling between them. Samuel still wore his coat, his gloves, but he'd stopped trying to disappear into the corner. It was progress. "The nightmares," Clara said finally. "How often? Every night?" "For how long?" 10 years. Her heart ached. 10 years of reliving whatever horror had driven him here. What happened, Samuel, really? He stared into his coffee. "I was a bounty hunter. After the war. I was good at it, tracking men, bringing them in. I didn't ask questions about who hired me or why. And the fire. I was tracking a man named Garrett Cole. Murderer, thief, wanted in 3 territories. I found him hiding in a farmhouse outside of a town called Miller's Creek. He'd taken the family hostage, a widow and her 2 children. Samuel's hands tightened on the cup. "I should have waited for backup. Should have planned it better. But I thought I could take him alone. I thought—" He broke off. "I was arrogant, and people died for it." "What happened?" "I went in through the back. Cole saw me coming. He—" Samuel's voice cracked. He set the fire. Said if he couldn't have the bounty on his head, nobody would. The whole place went up in minutes. The family. I got the widow out. And her son. But the girl... Samuel closed his eyes. She was upstairs. The stairs collapsed before I could reach her. I tried God. I tried. I went back in. He pulled at his collar, and Clara saw at the edge of scarred flesh, angry and red, even after all these years creeping up his neck. I was still inside when the roof came down. By the time they pulled me out, she was already gone. Clara's throat was tight. That wasn't your fault, Samuel. Cole set the fire. Cole killed that child. I gave him the reason. Samuel's eyes opened, filled with a pain so deep she could drown in it. If I'd been smarter, more patient, if I'd waited, you saved 2 people. I let one die. You tried to save her. You almost died trying. Almost doesn't count. He set down his cup with shaking hands. Not when a child's life is the price. Clara reached across the table. Slowly giving him time to pull away, she laid her hand over his gloved one. He flinched, but didn't move. I know about guilt, she said quietly. I know what it's like to believe you deserve punishment, to think that hiding is the same as penance. Her fingers tightened. But it's not Samuel. And the man who set that fire, who murdered that child, he's the one who should be carrying this, not you. Cole's dead, burned in his own fire. Then he paid his price. When do you stop paying yours? Samuel looked at their hands, her bare skin against his leather glove, and something shifted in his expression. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know how. Maybe, Clara said, you start by not sleeping in the barn. Despite everything, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're stubborn, Clara Brennan. I've been called worse. I don't doubt it. For the first time since they'd met, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was almost companionable. Then from somewhere outside came the sound of approaching hooves. Samuel was on his feet. Instantly, all vulnerability vanished, replaced by the hard wariness she'd first seen when he pulled her from the snow. Stay here, he ordered, moving toward the door. Samuel, stay here. He was gone before she could argue, disappearing into the fading afternoon light. Clara moved to the window, heart pounding. Through the frosted glass, she could see a rider approaching a man in a fine coat, sitting tall on a black horse. Even from this distance she recognized him. Elijah. Her stepfather had found her. Clara's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall beside the window, heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Elijah. Here. After everything, the running, the hiding, the near death in the blizzard, he'd found her anyway. Through the frost-covered glass, she watched Samuel step off the porch and walk toward the approaching rider. His posture had changed completely. Gone was the broken man who'd wept in her arms. In his place stood something harder, something dangerous. Elijah reined his horse to a stop about 20 feet from Samuel. Even from this distance, Clara could see his charming smile, the one he wore like a mask, the one that fooled everyone. Good afternoon, Elijah called out, his voice carrying that cultured Boston accent that had once seemed so refined. I'm looking for a woman, young brown hair about so tall. He gestured with a gloved hand. My stepdaughter. She's been missing for nearly 2 weeks now. Samuel didn't move. No women here. Ah, but I think there might be. Elijah's smile didn't waver. You see, I've been tracking her since she left Boston. The stagecoach driver in Kansas City remembered her quite clearly, said she was headed west, and the good woman at your general store mentioned that a young lady matching her description came through here recently. Clara's stomach dropped. Margaret. Of course Margaret had talked. Mrs. Hayes also mentioned, Elijah continued, that this young woman was asking about work, specifically about a notice posted by a Mr. Samuel Thornton. He spread his hands. So here I am. Like I said, no women here. Mr. Thornton, I understand your desire to protect a lady's privacy. It speaks well of your character. Elijah's voice dripped with false warmth. But I'm afraid my Clara is unwell. She suffers from delusions, hysteria. She needs to come home where she can receive proper care. Clara's hands clenched into fists. Hysteria. The word he'd used to explain away her bruises. The word he'd used to keep her isolated from friends, from family, from anyone who might believe her. Mister. Samuel's voice was flat. I don't know who you are or what you want, but there's no woman on my property. Now I suggest you turn that horse around and ride back the way you came. A long pause. Clara watched Elijah's smile flicker just for a moment before it returned. I see. He reached into his coat, and Clara saw Samuel tense. But Elijah only pulled out a folded paper. Perhaps this will help convince you. He urged his horse forward a few steps and held out the paper. Samuel didn't move to take it. It's a letter from a doctor in Boston, Elijah explained, detailing Clara's condition, her tendency to run away to tell wild stories about the people who love her, her need for constant supervision. His voice hardened just slightly. It also authorizes me to retrieve her by whatever means necessary. Don't care about your paper. You should, because if you're harboring her, a mentally unstable woman, a danger to herself and others, you could be held legally responsible. Samuel took a step forward, just one, but something in that movement made Elijah's horse dance backward nervously. Let me be clear, Samuel said, his voice dropping to something quiet and cold. I don't care about your letters. I don't care about your doctors. And I don't care about you. This is my land. You're not welcome on it. If you come back, I'll consider it trespassing. And if Clara is here, if she's inside that cabin right now listening to us, then that's her business, not yours. Elijah's mask slipped. For just a second, Clara saw what was underneath the rage, the possessiveness, the cold cruelty that lived behind those charming eyes. You don't know what you're dealing with, Elijah said softly. I always get what's mine. She ain't yours. She's my stepdaughter. She's a grown woman who can make her own choices. She's sick. She doesn't know what she wants. Samuel laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Mister, I've met a lot of men in my time. Bounty hunters, outlaws, killers. I can spot a predator from a mile away. He took another step forward. And you smell like prey dressed up in a predator's clothes. Now get off my land. Don't come back. For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought Elijah would refuse. She could see his hands tightening on the reins, his jaw working with suppressed fury. Then he smiled again. That terrible, charming smile. Of course. My apologies for disturbing you, Mr. Thornton. I'll be staying in town for a few days should you change your mind. He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. Clara didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until Samuel walked back inside, and she released it in a shuddering gasp. He found her pressed against the wall, trembling. Clara, I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I should have told you. Are you all right? The gentleness in his voice broke something inside her. She slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and buried her face in her hands. He found me. I ran so far, and he still found me. Samuel crouched in front of her, keeping that careful distance he always maintained. That man. He's your stepfather. Clara nodded. And what he said about you being unwell. A lie. She looked up, meeting his eyes. All of it. The doctors, the letters he paid for those. He's rich, Samuel. He can make anyone believe anything. What did he do to you? Clara's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't form the words. But Samuel seemed to understand. His expression shifted, darkening with something that might have been recognition. He hurt you, he said quietly, not just with words. Yes. And no one believed you. My mother, she chose him. Over me. She said I was making up stories for attention. Clara laughed bitterly. Hysteria. That's what they called it when I tried to tell people. A woman's condition. A woman's weakness. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the empty road where Elijah had disappeared. He'll be back. I know. He's not going to give up. I know that too. Samuel turned to face her. Then you have a choice to make. You can run again. Keep moving, keep hiding. Or you can stay. And we figure out how to deal with him together. Clara stared at him. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. No, Samuel agreed. I don't. Then why? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly he pulled off one of his gloves. Clara had seen glimpses of his scars before, the edge above his collar, the hint of damaged skin at his wrist. But she'd never seen them fully. His hand was a map of old wounds, burn scars twisted across his palm, and fingers the skin mottled and tight. It must have taken years to regain the full use of it. 10 years ago, Samuel said, I was the one running. I was the one hiding. And everyone told me I deserved what had happened to me, that I was a monster, that I should disappear and never come back. He flexed his scarred fingers. I did disappear. I came here, built this ranch, tried to make myself small enough that the world would forget I existed. And did it work? No. His pale eyes met hers. The world forgot, but I never did. I've spent 10 years punishing myself for something I can't change, and all it's done is make me alone. Clara pushed herself to her feet. Samuel. I'm tired of being alone, Clara. The words seemed to cost him something. And I'm tired of watching good people suffer because bad men hold the power. Maybe I can't change what happened in Miller's Creek, but I can change what happens here. He put his glove back on. If you want to stay, you stay. That man comes back, he deals with me. You don't know what he's capable of. Neither does he. Clara should have argued, should have pointed out all the ways this could go wrong. Elijah had money influence connections. Samuel was a scarred hermit who'd spent a decade hiding from his own shadow. But when she looked at him, really looked, she didn't see a broken man hiding from the world. She saw someone choosing for the first time in years to fight. All right, she said quietly. I'll stay. Something shifted in Samuel's expression. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Then we should get ready. Because a man like that doesn't make threats he doesn't intend to keep. The days that followed were tense. Clara found herself watching the road, constantly jumping at every sound. Samuel, for his part, seemed to have transformed. The withdrawn, haunted man she'd first met had been replaced by someone more alert, more present. He started carrying a rifle when he worked the ranch, and he moved the horses closer to the cabin in case they needed to leave quickly. But something else changed too. Samuel stopped sleeping in the barn. The first night after Elijah's visit, he came inside at dusk and simply sat down in the chair by the fire. Clara didn't comment. She just handed him a cup of coffee and took her own seat across from him. They sat in silence for an hour before he spoke. You should know more about me. In case it matters. It doesn't matter. It might. Clara set down her cup. All right, tell me. I wasn't always this. He gestured at himself, the scars, the isolation. I had a family once, parents, a brother. We had a farm in Missouri. Then the war came. You fought for the Union, 4 years. I saw things, did things that changed me. When I came home, the farm was gone, burned by Confederate raiders. My parents were dead. My brother had disappeared, never found out what happened to him. Clara's heart ached. Samuel, I had nothing. No family, no home, no purpose. So I became a bounty hunter. Figured if I couldn't save my own family, at least I could bring other people's monsters to justice." He laughed bitterly. "I was good at it too. Too good. I stopped seeing the men I hunted as people. They were just targets, bounties, numbers. Until Miller's Creek. Until Miller's Creek." He stared into the fire. "That little girl, her name was Emma. She was 7 years old, had red hair and freckles. She liked to read." "How do you know that?" "Because her mother told me, after, when she was screaming at me over her daughter's grave. She wanted me to know who I'd failed, wanted me to carry that name for the rest of my life. And you have. Every single day." Clara stood and crossed to his chair. Slowly giving him time to pull away, she knelt beside him and placed her hand over his gloved one. He didn't pull away. "Emma's death wasn't your fault, Samuel. It was Cole's. He set the fire. He made the choice. I gave him the opportunity. You tried to save her. You almost died trying." Her fingers tightened. "That's not the action of a monster. That's the action of a man who cared." "Caring wasn't enough." "Maybe not, but it's more than most people do." Samuel looked down at their joined hands. "Why aren't you afraid of me, Clara? Everyone else is. Even I'm afraid of me. Because I know what real monsters look like." She thought of Elijah, of his smile, of his hands. "And you're not one of them." Samuel lifted his free hand, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. His gloved fingers traced the fading bruise there. "He did this." "Yes." "He'll never touch you again." The words were quiet, but absolute. "I swear it." Clara believed him. 3 days later, the trouble started. Clara went to town for supplies against Samuel's objections, but they needed flour and salt, and she refused to hide forever. The looks she got on the street were different now, curious, suspicious. She understood why when she walked into Margaret Hayes's store. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Thornton's housekeeper." Margaret's voice dripped with false concern. "Your stepfather's been by, you know. Such a refined gentleman, so worried about you." "I'm sure he is." "He told me about your condition." Margaret leaned closer. "Said you'd been ill for years. Said you have episodes where you don't know what's real and what isn't." "And you believed him?" "Why wouldn't I? He's your family." "He's not my family." Clara kept her voice steady. "He's my mother's husband. There's a difference." "Still, a man doesn't come all this way for nothing. He clearly cares about you." Clara set her basket on the counter with more force than necessary. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to say this once. Whatever that man told you is a lie. He doesn't want to help me. He wants to own me. And if you had any sense, you'd stay far away from him." Margaret's expression hardened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning about the kind of man who smiles while he hurts you." She paid for her supplies and left without another word. But as she stepped onto the boardwalk, she nearly collided with a man coming the other way. Elijah. "Clara." His voice was warm, concerned, the perfect picture of a worried guardian. "Sweetheart, I've been so worried about you." Clara stepped back, her supplies clutched to her chest like a shield. "Stay away from me." Now." He reached for her arm. "Let's not make a scene. Why don't we find somewhere quiet to talk? Don't touch me." Several townspeople had stopped to watch. Clara could feel their eyes on her, judging, assessing. "I told you she was like this," Elijah said loudly enough for the onlookers to hear. "The poor dear doesn't know what she's saying half the time. It's the hysteria, it makes her paranoid, delusional." "I am not delusional." "Of course you'd say that, sweetheart." His voice dripped with false sympathy. "That's the nature of the illness. You don't even know you're sick." Clara felt tears of frustration prick her eyes. This was how he did it, how he always did it. Made her look crazy while he played the concerned protector. "Let go of me," she said through clenched teeth. "I'm just trying to help." She said let go. The voice came from behind Elijah. He turned, and Clara saw his expression flicker when he found himself face to face with Samuel. Samuel stood in the middle of the street, rifle in hand, his scarred face hard as stone. He looked like exactly what the townspeople had always feared, a dangerous man capable of terrible things. Right now, Clara had never been more grateful for it. "Mr. Thornton." Elijah's smile was strained. "This is a family matter. I'd appreciate it if—" "Take your hand off her. She's my stepdaughter. She's a grown woman who asked you not to touch her. I won't ask again." The townspeople had gone very still. Clara could feel the tension in the air, thick and dangerous. Elijah released her arm, but his eyes stayed locked on Samuel. "You're making a mistake siding with her. Clara is sick. She needs help that you can't provide." "What she needs," Samuel said quietly, "is for you to leave her alone. That's not going to happen." Elijah's mask slipped again just for a moment. "She belongs to me. People don't belong to people. Her mother gave her to me, signed the papers. I have legal authority. I don't care about your papers." Samuel took a step forward. "I don't care about your authority. What I care about is that woman asked you to leave her alone. So leave her alone." Elijah's jaw tightened. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Neither do you." The two men stared at each other. Clara could see the calculation in Elijah's eyes, weighing his options, assessing the threat. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said softly. "I have resources you can't imagine, Mr. Thornton. Friends in high places. Within a week, I'll have a court order authorizing me to take Clara back to Boston by force, and there won't be a thing you can do to stop me. We'll see about that." Elijah smiled that terrible, charming smile and walked away. Clara didn't realize she was shaking until Samuel took her arm. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." Home. Such a simple word. But when Samuel said it, it felt like a promise. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Clara sat beside Samuel on the wagon, her supplies forgotten in the back, trying to process what had just happened. "He's going to come back," she finally said. "With men. With papers. He always finds a way." "I know. You should send me away. Before he does something that hurts you too." Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. "Is that what you want to run again?" "No, but I don't want you to suffer because of me. Clara." He pulled the horses to a stop and turned to face her. "I've spent 10 years suffering for something that wasn't my fault. 10 years hiding, punishing myself, waiting for death to find me. And you know what I've learned?" "What?" "That suffering alone doesn't make you noble. It just makes you alone." He reached up and cupped her face in his gloved hand. "You're the first person in a decade who's looked at me and seen something other than a monster. The first person who's treated me like a man. Whatever happens, I'm not giving that up." "Samuel." "I'm not a hero, Clara. I'm not even a good man. But I'm someone who's tired of watching bad people win. And if standing with you means I finally have something worth fighting for, then that's what I'll do." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His thumb brushed away her tears. "I know you're brave. I know you're strong. I know you ran across the country to escape someone who should have protected you. And I know that you looked at me at all of this." He gestured at his scars, his isolation. "And you didn't run away." "I couldn't. I was stuck in a blizzard." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "And after the blizzard, I didn't want to." "Why not?" Clara placed her hand over his on her cheek. "Because you were the first person in years who looked at me and saw something other than a victim. The first person who treated me like I was capable of making my own choices." She turned her face and pressed a kiss to his palm, feeling him shiver at the contact. "Whatever happens, I'm not giving that up either." They stayed that way for a long moment, two broken people holding on to each other in the fading light. Then Samuel cleared his throat and picked up the reins again. "We should get back. Plan our next move." "What next move?" you heard him. "He'll have a court order within a week." "Then we have a week to figure out how to stop him." "How?" Samuel's jaw set. "I spent 10 years hunting men for money. I know how to find information, how to track people, how to uncover secrets they want to stay buried." His eyes met hers. "A man like that, a man who hurts women, who lies to get what he wants, he didn't start with you. There will be others. Witnesses. Evidence." Clara's heart quickened. "You think you can find something?" "I think a man that confident has gotten away with things before, and I think he's made enemies." Samuel flicked the reins, setting the horses moving again. "We just need to find them before he comes back." For the first time since Elijah had appeared on that road, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt hope. That night Samuel didn't sleep in the chair. He didn't sleep in the barn either. Clara was preparing for bed when she heard a knock on the bedroom door. She opened it to find Samuel standing there, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "I was thinking," he said slowly. "If Brennan sends men before we're ready, I should be close, in case there's trouble." Clara raised an eyebrow. And I could sleep on the floor, in your room, just to be safe." She should have said no, should have maintained the proper distance between a housekeeper and her employer. Instead, she stepped back and held the door open wider. "The floor is cold and hard, and you've been sleeping in a barn for 10 years. She nodded toward the bed. "I think we can manage sharing." Samuel's eyes widened. "Clara, that's not... I didn't mean... I know what you didn't mean." She softened her voice. "But I'm tired of being afraid, and I'm tired of you treating yourself like you don't deserve basic human comfort. So, come to bed. Sleep. I trust you." 3 words. I trust you. Such a simple thing. But Samuel looked at her like she'd handed him a gift beyond price. Slowly, carefully, he entered the room. Clara climbed into bed and moved to one side, leaving space. Samuel stood at the edge for a long moment, then sat down, removing his boots, but nothing else. "I don't..." He stopped, started again. "I don't know how to do this anymore. Be close to someone." "Neither do I." Clara reached out and took his hand. "But maybe we can figure it out together." He squeezed her fingers once. Then slowly he lay down beside her. They didn't touch beyond their joined hands. But Clara could feel his warmth, hear his breathing, sense his presence beside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. And when she finally fell asleep, she didn't dream of Elijah. She dreamed of snow melting in spring sun. Clara woke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar sensation of having slept through the night without nightmares. No Elijah's hands, no desperate running, just darkness and warmth and the steady sound of Samuel's breathing beside her. But Samuel was gone now, and pale winter light filtered through the frost-covered window. She found him at the table, a cup of coffee in one hand and a pencil in the other. Papers were spread before him, notes she realized covered in his neat handwriting. "You're up early," she said. Samuel looked up. Something in his expression had changed overnight. The haunted, withdrawn man she'd first met was still there, but underneath it, she saw something new. Purpose. "Couldn't sleep much. Mind kept working." He gestured to the papers. "Been trying to figure out how to find information on Brennan." Clara poured herself coffee and sat across from him. "And he said he's from Boston. Rich, connected, influential. Man like that leaves a trail. People talk. Especially people who've been hurt." "What kind of trail?" "That's what I need to find out." Samuel tapped the pencil against the table. "When I was hunting bounties, I learned that every man has a weakness. Something he's hiding. Something he's afraid of. Brennan's no different. He's been careful. He's gotten away with everything. Nobody gets away with everything. They just haven't been caught yet. Samuel met her eyes. I need to send some telegrams. Contact people I used to know. It'll take time, but... We don't have time, you heard him. A week. Then I work fast. Clara studied his face, the determination there, the fierce protectiveness that had replaced his usual wariness. Why are you doing this, Samuel? Really? Told you why. You told me you're tired of watching bad people win. But this is more than that. This is dangerous. Elijah has resources, connections. If you start digging into his past, he'll come after me. Samuel's jaw tightened. Good, let him. Samuel. Clara. He set down the pencil and leaned forward. For 10 years, I've been hiding from my own shadow, letting guilt eat me alive, convincing myself I deserved to be alone, that I was too dangerous to be around people. His scarred hand reached across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. You changed that. You looked at me and saw a man worth saving. Now let me be worth saving. Clara's throat tightened. She closed the distance between their hands, lacing her fingers through his. You already are. They stayed that way for a long moment, hands joined across the table, something unspoken passing between them. Then Samuel cleared his throat and pulled back. I need to ride into town. Send those telegrams. I'm coming with you. Clara? Don't argue. If Elijah's watching, he'll see you alone and think I'm vulnerable here. If we're together, he has to deal with both of us. Samuel looked like he wanted to protest. Then the corner of his mouth twitched almost a smile. You're stubborn. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. The ride to town was tense. Clara kept expecting to see Elijah on every corner, watching from every window. But the streets of Blackwater were quiet, just the usual bustle of a small frontier town going about its business. The telegraph office was a cramped room attached to the general store. The operator, a thin man named Jenkins, raised his eyebrows when Samuel walked in. Mr. Thornton, don't see you in town often. Need to send some messages, private ones. Jenkins glanced at Clara, curiosity plain on his face. Of course. Write what you need, I'll send them. Samuel spent the next half hour composing telegrams. Clara watched him work, noting the concentration on his face, the way his scarred hands moved carefully over the paper. He was writing to people in Boston, she realized. Pinkerton agents, lawyers, newspapermen. Anyone who might have information about Elijah Brennan. That's a lot of messages, Jenkins observed when Samuel handed over the stack. It's important. Must be. Jenkins counted the papers. This'll cost you. Samuel put money on the counter without hesitation. Send them today. And Jenkins, if anyone asks what I sent or where you don't know anything. Jenkins's eyes widened slightly. I understand, Mr. Thornton. As they left the office, Clara touched Samuel's arm. Do you trust him? No, but I trust money, and I paid him enough to keep quiet. They were halfway to the wagon when a voice stopped them cold. Well, isn't this touching? Elijah stepped out from the shadow of the general store, flanked by two men Clara didn't recognize. Big men, hard-faced. The kind of men who got paid to hurt people. Taking a morning stroll together. Elijah continued, his voice dripping with false warmth. Almost like a courting couple. Samuel moved in front of Clara, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. Brennan. Mr. Thornton, I see you've decided to involve yourself further in my family affairs. Elijah's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's very unfortunate. I told you to leave her alone. And I told you I'd be back with legal authority. But I've been thinking, why wait? Elijah spread his hands. I have two witnesses here who will swear that Clara came with me willingly, that you'd been holding her against her will, that I was merely rescuing my poor, confused stepdaughter from a dangerous criminal. Clara's blood turned to ice. No one will believe that. Won't they? Elijah's gaze swept the street. Several townspeople had stopped to watch, drawn by the confrontation. Everyone in this town already thinks Mr. Thornton is a monster, a killer, a beast who lives alone because no decent person would have him. Who do you think they'll believe, a respected Boston businessman or a scarred hermit with blood on his hands? Samuel didn't move, didn't react, but Clara could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. "Walk away, Brennan," Samuel said quietly, "while you still can. Or what, you'll shoot me in the middle of the street, in front of all these witnesses?" Elijah laughed. "That would certainly prove my point about you being dangerous. I don't need to shoot you." "Then what exactly do you plan to do?" Samuel took a step forward, just one. But something in that movement made Elijah's hired men shift nervously. "I plan to find out every dirty secret you've ever hidden, every woman you've hurt, every lie you've told. I plan to dig up everything you've buried and drag it into the light." Samuel's voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "And when I'm done, there won't be a court in this country that will take your side." For the first time, Clara saw real fear flicker across Elijah's face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual charming mask. But she'd seen it. He was afraid of what Samuel might find. "You're bluffing," Elijah said. "You don't know anything about me." "Not yet, but I will. I've spent 10 years tracking men who didn't want to be found. Men who'd killed, stolen, destroyed lives. They all thought they were untouchable too." Samuel's scarred face was impassive. They were wrong. A long, tense silence stretched between them. The townspeople watched, barely breathing. Then Elijah stepped back. "Enjoy your investigation, Mr. Thornton. I doubt you'll find anything useful." He turned to Clara, his eyes hard. "And Clara, sweetheart, remember that I'm a patient man. But my patience has limits. When I finally take you home, you'll pay for every day of this little rebellion." He walked away, his hired men following like shadows. Clara didn't realize she was shaking until Samuel's hand found hers. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go home." The days that followed were a blur of waiting. Samuel sent more telegrams, received responses, made notes. He didn't tell Clara everything he was learning, but she could see the growing tension in his shoulders, the late nights spent poring over papers by lamplight. "It's worse than I thought," he finally admitted one evening, sitting across from her at the table. "Brennan's been married before. Twice." Clara's stomach dropped. "What? His first wife died under mysterious circumstances. The official verdict was illness, but the neighbors talked. Bruises, broken bones. A woman who stopped leaving the house near the end. And the second wife, committed to an asylum for hysteria." Samuel's voice was flat. "Sound familiar?" Clara felt sick. "He's done this before. Many times, from what I can tell. He finds vulnerable women, isolates them, controls them. And when they try to escape, he destroys them." Clara's hands clenched on the table. How is he still free? How has no one stopped him? Money, power, connections, and the fact that no one believes women when they speak against men like him. Samuel reached across and covered her hands with his. "But this time is different." "How?" "Because this time he's made an enemy who has nothing to lose." Clara looked at their joined hands. "You have things to lose, Samuel. This ranch, your safety, your life. Those aren't things, they're just existence." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "You taught me that. I taught you. Before you came, I was just waiting to die, marking time until the guilt finally finished what the fire started. But then you showed up half-frozen, terrified, running from your own monster, and you looked at me like I was human." His voice roughened. "That's worth fighting for. That's worth everything." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Samuel?" "I'm not going to let him take you, Clara. I don't care what it costs." She stood and moved around the table. Samuel's eyes tracked her, uncertain, as she stopped in front of his chair. "Stand up," she said quietly. He obeyed, his brow furrowed with confusion. Clara reached up and touched his face, the scarred cheek, the hard jaw, the eyes that held so much pain and so much hope. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of waiting for the next bad thing to happen." Her fingers traced the edge of his scar. "I want to feel something good, just once, before everything falls apart. Clara, kiss me." His breath caught. I haven't, it's been so long." "I know." She rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. "Kiss me anyway." For a long moment he didn't move. She could see the war in his eyes, want against fear, hope against the certainty that he didn't deserve this. Then slowly, his hands came up to cradle her face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if she might shatter at any moment. "If I do this," he said hoarsely, "I won't be able to stop. I won't be able to go back to being strangers. I don't want to go back." Clara. Samuel. She met his eyes, letting him see everything, the fear, the hope, the desperate wanting. "Please." He kissed her. It was clumsy at first, two people out of practice rediscovering something they'd thought lost. But then Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, and Samuel made a sound low in his throat, and suddenly it wasn't clumsy anymore. It was desperate, hungry, like two people dying of thirst who'd finally found water. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. "That was... yes. I should probably... don't you dare apologize." A genuine laugh escaped him, rough and rusty from disuse but real. "I wasn't going to. I was going to say I should have done that days ago." Clara smiled, her heart so full it ached. Better late than never. That night they shared the bed again. But this time, they didn't just hold hands. Samuel pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he murmured against her hair, "know that this tonight meant everything. It's not going to be just tonight. You can't know that." "I can believe it." She turned in his arms, facing him. "I believe in you, Samuel Thornton. I believe we're going to beat him, and I believe that when this is over, we're going to have a life, a real one, together." His eyes searched hers in the darkness. "How can you have so much faith?" "Because I have to. Because the alternative is giving up, and I'm done giving up." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "Then I'll believe too, for you." They fell asleep, tangled together. Two people who'd been alone for too long finally finding their way home. The response came 4 days later. Samuel was in the barn when the messenger arrived, but Clara saw the man coming up the road and ran to get him. By the time they reached the cabin, the messenger was already dismounting. "Telegram for Samuel Thornton," the man said, holding out an envelope. "Urgent from Boston." Samuel took it with steady hands, though Clara could see the tension in his jaw. "Thank you." The messenger remounted and rode away. Samuel stood in the yard, staring at the envelope. "Open it," Clara said. He did. She watched his face as he read, watched his expression shift from tension to disbelief to something fierce and triumphant. "Samuel, what does it say?" He looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, he was smiling. Really smiling. "We've got him." Inside the cabin, he spread the telegram on the table and read it aloud. "Stop. Elijah Brennan investigated for fraud and assault in Boston, 1868. Stop. First wife Mary Brennan, death suspicious. Stop. 3 former servants willing to testify to abuse. Stop. Second wife, Eleanor Brennan, escaped asylum location unknown. Stop. Boston authorities interested in new testimony. Stop. Federal marshal en route to Colorado. Stop. Arrive within week. Stop." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. "They believe us." "They believe the evidence." Samuel set down the telegram. The Pinkertons I contacted did some digging, found people willing to talk, people Brennan thought he'd silenced forever. The second wife, Eleanor, she escaped. Apparently, 3 years ago. Brennan told everyone she died in the asylum, but she got out somehow. Changed her name. Disappeared. Samuel's eyes met hers. She's alive, Clara, and she's willing to testify. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. All these years I thought I was the only one. I thought no one would ever believe me. You're not alone. You never were. Samuel crossed to her, wiping her tears with his thumbs. Brennan's been building this house of lies for decades. Now it's going to come crashing down. What do we do until the marshal arrives? We wait. We stay alert. And we don't give Brennan any reason to move before we're ready. But Elijah had other plans. That night, Clara woke to the smell of smoke. Samuel. He was already moving, throwing on his boots, grabbing his rifle. Through the window, she could see an orange glow, the barn engulfed in flames. Stay inside, Samuel ordered, heading for the door. Samuel, wait. But he was already gone, running toward the inferno. Clara threw on her coat and followed. The barn was fully ablaze by the time she reached it, flames licking at the night sky. Samuel was struggling to open the corral gate, trying to free the horses that screamed and thrashed against the fence. She ran to help him, her fingers fumbling with the latch. Together they got it open, and the terrified animals bolted into the darkness. The barn. Samuel started. Let it burn, Clara said. Buildings can be rebuilt. You can't. As if in answer, a section of the roof collapsed, sending sparks spiraling upward. Samuel pulled Clara back, shielding her from the heat. That's when they heard the applause. Elijah emerged from the shadows, his 2 hired men beside him. All 3 were silhouetted against the flames, dark shapes watching the destruction with satisfaction. Such a tragedy, Elijah said, his voice carrying over the roar of the fire. An accident, surely. Old barn, dry wood, careless with a lantern, perhaps. Samuel pushed Clara behind him. You did this. Me, I've been in town all evening. Plenty of witnesses. Elijah spread his hands. But accidents happen on isolated ranches, especially to people who make enemies. You're insane. I'm practical. You should have taken my offer, Thornton. Should have handed Clara over when you had the chance. Elijah's smile was terrible in the firelight. Now I'm going to take her anyway, and this time there won't be anyone left to stop me. He nodded to his men. They moved forward, one drawing a knife, the other a length of rope. Samuel raised his rifle. Don't. Going to shoot us in cold blood in front of a witness. Elijah laughed. That would make my job so much easier. The scarred hermit finally snapped, killed 2 men. Had to be put down like a rabid dog. And poor Clara, traumatized by the violence, needed to be taken home to recover. You planned this, Clara realized. All of it. The fire, the confrontation, everything. I've been planning this for weeks, sweetheart. Ever since you ran. Elijah's eyes gleamed. Did you really think you could escape me? That some broken-down bounty hunter could protect you from what I am? What you are, Samuel said quietly, is a dead man walking. Elijah laughed. Big words from a man who spends his nights screaming about a fire he couldn't stop. Tell me, Thornton, when you close your eyes, do you still hear that little girl burning? Samuel flinched. Clara saw it, saw the old guilt rise up, saw the doubt flicker across his face, and Elijah saw it too. That's what I thought. You're weak, broken, haunted by your own failures. Elijah stepped forward, confidence radiating from every line of his body. You couldn't save that child. You can't save Clara. You can't even save yourself. You're wrong. The voice came from Clara. She stepped out from behind Samuel, her chin raised, her eyes blazing. Clara, get back. Samuel started. No. She stood her ground, facing Elijah directly. You think you know him. You think you understand what he's capable of. I think I understand weakness when I see it. Then you're blind. Clara's voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. Samuel Thornton walked into a burning building to save strangers. He carries that guilt not because he failed, but because he cared. That's not weakness. That's strength you'll never understand. Touching. But words won't. I'm not finished. Clara took another step forward. You've spent your whole life breaking people. Women who trusted you, who loved you, who had no one else to turn to. You made them believe they were crazy, worthless, alone. But you made a mistake with me. And what was that? You taught me what real monsters look like. Clara smiled, and there was no warmth in it. So when I met Samuel, I knew he wasn't one. And I knew that whatever scars he carries, whatever demons haunt him, he's 10 times the man you'll ever be. Silence fell over the yard. Even the fire seemed to crackle more quietly. Elijah's mask slipped. The charming facade crumbled, revealing the rage beneath pure, ugly violence. "Grab her!" He snarled at his men. They lunged forward. Samuel moved faster. The rifle shot cracked through the night, catching the first man in the shoulder. He went down screaming. The second man hesitated just for a second, and Samuel was on him using the rifle like a club, driving him to the ground. Elijah backed away, his eyes wide. You can't." "Run." Samuel set his voice cold as winter ice. "Run now, and maybe you'll make it to town before I catch you. Stay, and I promise you'll regret it." Elijah ran. He sprinted toward the road, stumbling over the frozen ground, all pretense of dignity abandoned. Clara watched him go, feeling something loosen in her chest. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't untouchable. He was just a man. A small, vicious man who only had power when everyone was too afraid to fight back. Samuel lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking. "Clara!" She threw herself into his arms. He caught her, held her, buried his face in her hair. Behind them, the barn continued to burn flames, consuming everything they'd built. But Clara didn't care about the barn. She cared about the man holding her. The man who'd faced down her monster when no one else would. "It's not over," Samuel murmured. "He'll be back. With more men, more resources. Then we'll face him again." Clara pulled back, looking into his eyes. "Together." "Clara, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm telling." She touched his scarred cheek, her fingers gentle. "I'm done running. I'm done hiding. Whatever comes next, we face it side by side." Samuel's eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Side by side," he repeated. They stood together in the firelight, two people who'd found each other in the darkness, refusing to let go. The marshal would arrive soon. The evidence would come to light. Elijah would face justice for everything he'd done. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, all that mattered was this, two hearts broken and battered but still beating, choosing hope over fear, choosing each other. The morning after the fire brought a bitter cold that seeped through every crack in the cabin walls. Clara woke with Samuel's arms still wrapped around her, his breath warm against her neck. They'd barely slept, taking turns keeping watch through the night, waiting for Elijah to return with more men. He hadn't. But the ashes of the barn still smoldered in the yard, a stark reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. "We need to get to town," Samuel said as they shared a meager breakfast of bread and cold coffee. "Report what happened. File charges before Brennan spins his version of events." "Will anyone believe us? Sheriff Dalton's a fair man, and those two hired men, the one I shot, isn't going anywhere fast. If we can get him to talk." Clara nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. Elijah had always been so good at twisting the truth, at making himself the victim and her the villain. But this time was different. This time she wasn't alone. They rode into Blackwater together. Samuel's rifle across his lap, Clara pressed close behind him on the horse. The town was already buzzing with activity. When they arrived, people clustered in groups, whispering, pointing. "Word travels fast," Samuel muttered. They found Sheriff Robert Dalton outside his office, deep in conversation with Dr. Whitmore. Both men looked up as Samuel and Clara approached. Thornton. The sheriff's weathered face was unreadable. Heard about your barn. Did you also hear who set the fire? Got a few different versions of that story. Dalton's eyes moved to Clara. Mrs. Hayes says you've been causing trouble ever since you came to town. Says your stepfather's been worried sick about you. Clara's stomach dropped. Mrs. Hayes is wrong. Maybe. But Brennan's been making a lot of noise this morning. Says you and Thornton attacked his men unprovoked. Says he was just trying to bring his sick stepdaughter home. That's a lie. Figured it might be. The sheriff crossed his arms. Which is why I've got one of those men in my jail right now bleeding all over my floor and singing like a bird. Clara's breath caught. He's talking. Once I told him the alternative was hanging for arson and attempted kidnapping, he got real cooperative. Dalton's expression softened just slightly. He says Brennan paid them $50 each to burn your barn and grab Miss Brennan. Says there's been other jobs too back east. Women who needed to be convinced to cooperate. Samuel's hand found Clara's. And Brennan? Gone. Rode out before dawn. But I've sent word to the marshals. He won't get far. Relief flooded through Clara, so intense her knees nearly buckled. You believe us. I believe evidence, miss. And right now the evidence says Brennan's the monster, not Thornton here. The sheriff jerked his thumb toward his office. Come inside. I need official statements from both of you. They spent the next 2 hours in the sheriff's cramped office recounting everything: Clara's flight from Boston, Elijah's pursuit, the threats, the fire. Samuel added what he'd learned from his telegrams, the pattern of abuse stretching back decades. Dr. Whitmore listened to it all, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. I examined Miss Brennan when she first arrived, he said quietly. The bruises on her face, her wrists, they were consistent with being grabbed restrained. At the time I thought... He trailed off, looking ashamed. I thought perhaps she'd been in an accident on the road. You didn't ask, Clara said. It wasn't an accusation. Just a statement of fact. No, I didn't. The doctor met her eyes. I'm sorry. You're not the one who should be apologizing. A commotion outside interrupted them. Dalton moved to the window, then swore under his breath. What is it? Samuel asked. Looks like the cavalry's arrived. Clara joined him at the window. A group of riders had entered town, 6 men in total, led by a tall figure in a dark coat with a silver star pinned to his chest. Federal Marshal, Dalton said. Faster than I expected. The marshal dismounted and strode toward the sheriff's office with the easy confidence of a man used to being obeyed. He was perhaps 50, with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Sheriff Dalton. The marshal's voice carried even through the closed door. I'm Marshal William Crawford. I'm looking for a man named Elijah Brennan. Dalton opened the door. He's not here. Fled this morning. So I heard. Crawford's gaze swept the room, landing on Clara. You must be Miss Brennan. I've been reading some very interesting reports about your stepfather. I imagine you have. The woman who wrote most of them is outside. Thought you might want to meet her. Clara frowned. What woman? Crawford stepped aside, revealing a figure who'd been waiting just outside the door. She was perhaps 40, thin and worn-looking, with gray streaking her dark hair. But her eyes were sharp, alert, the eyes of a survivor. Clara, the woman said softly. My name is Eleanor. I was Elijah's second wife. The room went silent. Clara stared at the woman, this ghost from Elijah's past, this woman who should have been dead or locked away in an asylum. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, trembling slightly, but holding her ground. You're alive, Clara finally managed. Barely. For a long time, I wished I wasn't. Eleanor took a tentative step into the room. But then I heard someone was finally standing up to him. Someone was finally fighting back. I had to come. How did you escape? A nurse at the asylum. She saw the truth, saw what Elijah had done to put me there. She helped me get out, gave me money, a new name. Eleanor's voice shook. "I've been hiding ever since. 5 years. Always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for him to find me. He told everyone you were dead." "Of course he did. It's easier to control the narrative when there are no witnesses." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I heard about you. Heard he'd remarried, that there was a stepdaughter. I wanted to warn you, but I was too afraid, too broken." Clara crossed the room and took Eleanor's hands in hers. "You're here now. That's what matters. I've written down everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every time he hurt me and made me believe it was my fault. The Marshalls have it all." Eleanor squeezed Clara's fingers. "He's not going to get away with it this time. I won't let him." Marshal Crawford cleared his throat. "We've already issued warrants for Brennan's arrest. Fraud, assault, false imprisonment, attempted kidnapping. If we can prove he had anything to do with his first wife's death, we'll add murder to the list." "What about the men he hired?" Samuel asked. "The ones who burned my barn?" "They'll testify in exchange for lighter sentences. They're already giving us names, other women Brennan targeted, other crimes he's covered up." Crawford's expression was grim. "This man has been preying on vulnerable women for over 20 years. It ends now." Clara felt something shift in her chest, the weight she'd been carrying for so long finally beginning to lift. "What happens next?" "We find Brennan and bring him in. My men are already searching the roads out of town. He can't have gotten far." Crawford turned to Samuel. "Mr. Thornton, I understand you used to be a bounty hunter." Samuel's jaw tightened. "That was a long time ago." "Maybe, but if you're willing, we could use someone who knows how to track." Clara saw the conflict in Samuel's eyes, the old guilt rising up, the fear of becoming what he used to be. She touched his arm. "Samuel." He looked at her. "You don't have to," she said quietly. "You've already done enough." "Have I?" His voice was rough. "Brennan's still out there, still free. As long as he's running. Then the Marshalls will find him. And if they don't," Clara held his gaze, "then we'll deal with that when it happens. Together." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Crawford. "I'll help you track him, but I'm not going alone. And I'm not killing anyone unless there's no other choice. That's all I'm asking." They set out within the hour, Samuel, Marshal Crawford, and 3 deputies. Clara wanted to go with them, but Samuel had been adamant. "If Brennan doubles back if he tries to get to you while I'm gone, I know." Clara touched his face, memorizing the feel of him. "Be careful." "I will." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks the corner of her mouth. "This ends today. I promise." She watched him ride away, Eleanor standing silently beside her. "He loves you," Eleanor said softly. Clara's throat tightened. "I know. Don't let Elijah take that from you, no matter what happens." Clara turned to look at the other woman, this survivor, this fighter, this woman who'd lost everything and still found the strength to come back. "I won't," she said. "I promise." The hours that followed were the longest of Clara's life. She stayed in town at Eleanor's insistence, waiting at the hotel for word of the search. Dr. Whitmore came by to check on them. Sheriff Dalton stopped in with updates. The hired man in the jail had provided more information, more names, more evidence of Elijah's crimes. 20 years, Eleanor said, shaking her head as they sat in the hotel parlor. 20 years of destroying women's lives, and no one stopped him. "People tried," Clara said. "You tried." "I failed. He put me in that asylum and I almost died there. Would have, if not for that nurse." Eleanor's hands twisted in her lap. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have fought harder, screamed louder, made someone listen." "That's not how it works. Men like Elijah, they're experts at making us doubt ourselves, at making us think we're the crazy ones." Clara reached over and stilled Eleanor's restless hands. "But we're not crazy. We never were. No, we were just trapped. And now we're free." Eleanor looked up, tears streaming down her face. Can we ever really be free of what he did to us?" Clara thought about that. Thought about the nightmares she still had, the flinching at sudden movements, the way her heart raced whenever she saw a man who looked even slightly like Elijah. Maybe not completely, she admitted. Maybe the scars never fully heal. But we can choose what to do with them. We can choose to keep living, keep fighting, keep loving. She squeezed Eleanor's hands. That's freedom. Not the absence of pain, but the choice to move forward despite it. Eleanor stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. You're stronger than I was at your age. I had help. Clara thought of Samuel, his quiet strength, his unwavering protection, his willingness to fight for her, even when he didn't believe he deserved to fight for himself. And so do you now. They were still sitting together when the door burst open. Sheriff Dalton stood in the entrance, his face flushed from the cold. They found him. Clara's heart stopped. Is he alive, in custody? Dalton's expression was grim but satisfied. Thornton tracked him to an abandoned mine about 10 miles east. Brennan tried to run, but Crawford's men cut him off. He's on his way back to town now. Clara rose on shaking legs. And Samuel? Fine. A few scrapes, nothing serious. The sheriff hesitated. He asked me to tell you something. What? He said, tell her it's over. Tell her she's safe. Dalton's weathered face softened. That man rode through a blizzard to track a monster, and all he cared about was getting a message to you. Whatever you've got with him, Miss Brennan, that's rare. Don't let it go. Clara didn't intend to. She was waiting on the street when the riders returned. The townspeople had gathered too, drawn by the commotion, whispering among themselves. Clara barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on the group approaching. Marshal Crawford in the lead, his deputies flanking a figure with bound hands, slumped over a horse. Elijah. Even from a distance, Clara could see how diminished he looked. The charming mask was gone, replaced by something desperate and defeated. His fine clothes were torn and muddy, his hair disheveled, his face bruised. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a man. A small, pathetic man who'd finally run out of people to hurt. Samuel rode at the back of the group. When he saw Clara, something in his expression shifted: relief, joy, love, all tangled together. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, crossing the distance between them in 3 long strides. Clara met him halfway, throwing herself into his arms. You're safe, she whispered against his chest. You're safe. So are you. His arms tightened around her. It's done, Clara. He's done. Behind them, the deputies were pulling Elijah from his horse. Clara turned in Samuel's embrace to watch as her stepfather was dragged toward the jail. Elijah's eyes found her across the street. For a moment, something of the old cruelty flickered there, the possessive rage, the cold calculation. Then it died, replaced by something like recognition. He'd lost. Clara. His voice cracked. Clara, please. She stepped forward, Samuel's hand still in hers. I spent 3 years being afraid of you, she said quietly. 3 years believing I was crazy, worthless, alone. You made me think no one would ever help me, that I'd never escape, that I belonged to you. I only wanted... You wanted a victim. Someone you could control, manipulate, destroy. Clara's voice grew stronger. But I'm not your victim anymore. I'm a survivor. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never hurt anyone again. Elijah's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful! That's enough! Marshal Crawford stepped between them. Get him inside. We've got a long list of charges to go through. As the deputies dragged Elijah toward the jail, he looked back one last time. But Clara had already turned away. She didn't need to watch him fall. She already knew he'd never get back up. That night, Samuel and Clara returned to the ranch. The barn was nothing but ashes, now a black scar against the white snow. But the cabin still stood warm and solid, waiting for them. I'll rebuild, Samuel said, surveying the damage. Come spring. Make it bigger, stronger. Clara leaned against him, exhausted but at peace. I'd like that. They went inside, shedding coats and boots gravitating toward the fire like moths to flame. Samuel added wood while Clara made coffee, the simple domesticity of it almost painful in its sweetness. What happens now? She asked as they settled into chairs before the hearth. With Elijah, I mean. Crawford says there'll be a trial, multiple trials probably in different states. He's done enough evil to keep the courts busy for years. Samuel's scarred hand found hers in the space between their chairs. Eleanor's testimony alone could put him away for decades. Good. Clara stared into the flames. I want him to grow old in a cell. I want him to watch the world go on without him. I want him to know that all his money, all his power, all his manipulation, none of it saved him in the end. Is that enough, Will, that give you peace? Clara considered the question. Maybe not peace, but it's a start. She turned to look at Samuel. What about you? Will you find peace? He was quiet for a long moment. The firelight played across his scarred face shadows, and gold dancing together. I never thought I would, he finally said. After Miller's Creek, after what happened, I was so sure I deserved every moment of suffering, every nightmare, every lonely night, every whisper behind my back. His eyes met hers. But then you came, half frozen, half dead, running from your own demons. And you looked at me like I was worth something. You are worth something. I'm starting to believe that. His voice roughened. Clara, I've spent 10 years punishing myself for failing to save one little girl. And I'll carry that guilt until the day I die. But tonight, watching Brennan get dragged to that jail, knowing you're safe, knowing we won, I felt something I haven't felt in a decade. What? Hope. He squeezed her hand. Hope that maybe I can do some good after all. That maybe failing once doesn't mean I'll fail forever. That maybe... He stopped struggling with the words. Clara stood and moved to kneel before his chair, taking both his hands in hers. Maybe what? Maybe I deserve to be happy. The confession seemed to cost him something. I never thought I did. Never believed anyone could look at these scars, hear my story, and want to stay. But you did. You're still here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Clara reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of his scars. Samuel Thornton. I came to this town with nothing. No family, no home, no hope. I was ready to die in that blizzard because I thought death was better than going back to Elijah. Her voice shook. And then you found me. You saved me. Not just from the snow, but from the belief that I'd never be safe again. Clara. You asked me why I wasn't afraid of you. The truth is I was afraid. But not of you, of losing you. Of watching you retreat into that barn every night, convincing yourself you don't deserve warmth or comfort or love. She pressed her forehead to his. I'm tired of being afraid, and I'm tired of watching you be afraid too. What are you saying? I'm saying stay, in the cabin with me every night. I'm saying let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. I'm saying build that barn in the spring, and build a life with it. Her eyes met his. I'm saying, marry me, Samuel. His breath caught. Clara, that's not I should be the one. Why? Because you're the man. She smiled. I've had enough of men deciding my future. This time I'm choosing. And I choose you. Samuel stared at her stunned, vulnerable, more open than she'd ever seen him. Then he laughed a real laugh, full of joy and wonder and something like disbelief. Yes, he said. Yes, Clara. I'll marry you. She kissed him then, deep and true, putting every ounce of hope and promise into it. His arms came around her, pulling her close, holding her like he'd never let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it that first night when you refused to leave despite everything I'd shown you. You can say it now. I love you, Clara Brennan. I love your stubbornness, your courage, your refusal to give up. I love the way you looked at my scars and saw a man worth saving." His voice cracked. "And I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." Clara smiled through her tears. "You already are." Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and quiet, covering the ashes of the old barn with a blanket of white. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the darkness held on tight, finally believing they deserved the light. The trial of Elijah Brennan began 3 weeks later in Denver. Clara made the journey with Samuel at her side, Eleanor traveling with them in the stagecoach that carried witnesses and evidence to the federal courthouse. The roads were treacherous with winter ice, but Clara barely noticed the discomfort. Every mile that passed was a mile closer to justice. "You don't have to testify," Samuel reminded her as they neared the city. "Eleanor's testimony, the hired men's confessions, there's enough to convict him without you taking the stand." "I know." Clara's hands were steady in her lap. "But I want to. I need to look him in the eye and tell the truth. Not for him, for me. For every woman who was never believed." Samuel covered her hands with his scarred one. "Then I'll be right there, front row." "I know you will." The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. Word had spread about the wealthy Boston businessman accused of decades of abuse, and curious spectators filled every available seat. Reporters from newspapers as far away as New York scribbled notes eager for scandal. Clara sat in the witness gallery with Samuel and Eleanor watching as the prosecution laid out their case. The evidence was damning: financial records showing payments to doctors who'd falsified diagnoses, testimony from servants who'd witnessed violence, letters from Elijah's first wife describing her fear in the months before her death. When it was Eleanor's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand with her head held high. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she described her marriage, the isolation, the manipulation, the gradual erosion of her sense of self. "He made me believe I was insane," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "Made me believe I deserved everything he did to me. And when I finally found the courage to speak up, he had me committed to an asylum. He told everyone I was dangerous, delusional, that I needed to be locked away for my own good." "And were you," the prosecutor asked, "dangerous or delusional?" "No, I was just a woman who wouldn't stay silent anymore." The courtroom was utterly still. When Clara's turn came, she rose from her seat and walked toward the witness stand, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Elijah sat at the defense table, smaller somehow in his prison clothes, his charming mask completely gone. She didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at the jury, 12 men tasked with deciding whether her suffering had been real. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Clara Josephine Brennan." "And what is your relationship to the defendant?" "He was my stepfather. He married my mother when I was 20 years old." "Can you describe your experience living in his household?" Clara took a breath. And then she told them everything. She told them about the first time Elijah had hit her a slap across the face for speaking out of turn at dinner. She told them about the escalation that followed, the bruises she'd learned to hide the explanations she'd been forced to give. She told them about her mother's willful blindness, her desperate pleas that fell on deaf ears, her growing conviction that no one would ever believe her. "He told me I was crazy," Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "He told me I was imagining things, that I was sick in the head, that I needed help. And I almost believed him. I almost let him convince me that my own experiences weren't real." "What changed?" Clara finally allowed herself to look at Elijah. He stared back at her, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "I ran," she said simply. "I ran as far as I could with nothing but the clothes on my back and a desperate hope that somewhere someone would believe me." Her eyes moved to Samuel sitting in the front row, his scarred face full of love and pride. "And someone did." The defense tried to discredit her, Elijah's lawyer produced the medical records, the diagnosis of hysteria, the testimony of doctors who swore Clara was mentally unstable. But the prosecution had done their work well. One by one, they revealed that every doctor had been paid by Elijah, that the medical records had been falsified, that the diagnosis had been purchased like any other commodity. Mr. Brennan didn't have a sick stepdaughter, the prosecutor declared in his closing argument. He had a victim, a woman he couldn't control, couldn't break, couldn't silence. And when she finally escaped him, he followed her across the country, hired men to burn down the property where she was sheltering, and attempted to kidnap her by force. He turned to the jury, his voice ringing through the silent courtroom. Elijah Brennan is not a concerned family member. He is a predator. He has spent 20 years destroying women's lives, hiding behind wealth and social position, confident that no one would ever hold him accountable. Today, you have the chance to prove him wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Clara was sitting in the hallway with Samuel and Eleanor when the bailiff emerged to announce the verdict. Her heart hammered against her ribs as they filed back into the courtroom. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor." The foreman stood, a piece of paper trembling in his hands. "On the charge of assault with intent to do bodily harm, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of false imprisonment, guilty. On the charge of fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, guilty." The litany continued, guilty after guilty after guilty, a cascade of justice that left Clara breathless. Elijah's face went white. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked truly afraid. "Elijah Brennan," the judge intoned, "you have been found guilty on all counts. You will be sentenced to no less than 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole." The gavel came down like a thunderclap. Court is adjourned. Clara didn't remember leaving the courtroom. She didn't remember the reporters shouting questions or the curious onlookers pressing close for a glimpse of the woman who'd brought down the monster. All she remembered was Samuel's arms around her, his voice in her ear saying, "It's over, Clara, it's over." And Eleanor weeping with relief saying, "We did it, we actually did it." They returned to Blackwater 3 days later. The town that had once whispered about the scarred hermit and his mysterious housekeeper now greeted them with something approaching respect. Word of the trial had spread, and the people who'd believed Elijah's lies about Clara's hysteria now looked away in shame when she passed. Margaret Hayes was waiting for them outside the general store. "Mrs. Thornton," the older woman said, using Clara's married name, though the wedding hadn't happened yet. "I owe you an apology." Clara stopped, surprised. "Mrs. Hayes, I believed that man, believed every word he said about you." Margaret's face was pinched with guilt. "I thought I was helping, steering folks away from you, warning them about your condition. But I was just making things worse. You didn't know. I should have asked, should have looked closer." Margaret's eyes were wet. "My own sister. She was married to a man like that. I should have recognized the signs." Clara studied the woman who'd made her first weeks in Blackwater so difficult. She could hold on to the anger, nurture it, let it poison every future interaction. Or she could let it go. "We all make mistakes," Clara said finally. "What matters is what we do after." Margaret nodded slowly. "If there's anything I can do, anything at all, actually there is." Clara glanced at Samuel, who was watching the exchange with quiet approval. "We're getting married next week. We could use someone to help with the preparations." The older woman's face transformed. "I'd be honored." The wedding took place on a crisp January morning in the small church with the crooked steeple that Clara had noticed on her first day in Blackwater. The guest list was modest Sheriff Dalton and his wife Dr. Whitmore, the ranch hands Samuel had hired to help rebuild the barn, and Margaret Hayes, who'd thrown herself into the preparations with the fervor of someone seeking redemption. Eleanor had returned to Boston to testify at additional trials, but she'd sent a letter that arrived the morning of the ceremony. "Dear Clara, Samuel read aloud as Clara finished pinning her hair. I wish I could be there to see you marry the man who helped save both of us. But I'm needed here. There are other women coming forward now. Other victims who finally feel safe enough to tell their stories. Your courage gave them that. Never forget what you've accomplished. You didn't just save yourself, you lit a fire that's still spreading, with love and eternal gratitude, Eleanor. Clara pressed the letter to her heart. She's right, you know. We started something. You started something, Samuel corrected. I just helped. We did it together. Clara turned to face him. Her wedding dress simple but beautiful, her eyes bright with happy tears. Everything we've done together. And everything we'll do from now on. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. Clara walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, and she wouldn't have wanted one. She was giving herself freely and completely to the man who'd taught her that love didn't have to hurt. Samuel waited at the altar, his scars visible for once, his shirt open at the collar. He'd offered to cover up to wear his usual high-collared shirt for the occasion. Clara had refused. I fell in love with all of you, she'd told him. The scars are part of your story. I want everyone to see them. Now, as she reached him and took his hands, she saw the emotion in his pale blue eyes, the wonder, the gratitude, the fierce protective love that had saved her life. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Samuel Wade Thornton and Clara Josephine Brennan. Clara barely heard the words. She was lost in Samuel's gaze, in the feel of his scarred hands holding hers, in the absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Do you, Samuel, take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part? I do. Samuel's voice was rough with emotion. I do with everything I am and everything I'll ever be. And do you, Clara, take Samuel to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part? Clara smiled through her tears. I do. I absolutely do. Then by the power vested in me I pronounce you husband and wife. The minister beamed. You may kiss the bride. Samuel cupped her face in his hands. Those scarred, gentle hands that had pulled her from a blizzard, defended her from a monster, held her through the darkest nights. I love you, Mrs. Thornton, he whispered. I love you too, Mr. Thornton. And he kissed her deep and true, sealing their vows with a promise that needed no words. The guests cheered. Margaret Hayes dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Sheriff Dalton clapped Samuel on the back hard enough to make him stumble. And Clara laughed. Really laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. She was home. Spring came slowly to Colorado that year. The snow melted in fits and starts, revealing the blackened ruins of the old barn, and the fresh lumber Samuel had ordered for the new one. He worked on it every day often, with help from neighbors who'd gradually overcome their fear of the beast of Blackwater. Clara watched him sometimes from the cabin window, marveling at the changes the past months had wrought. The hunted look was gone from his eyes. He stood straighter, smiled more easily, laughed without that edge of surprise that had characterized his early attempts at joy. The nightmares still came sometimes. Clara would wake to find him sitting up in bed, breathing hard, his scars livid in the moonlight. But now she could reach for him, hold him, whisper reassurances until the ghosts retreated. Emma, he told her one night after a particularly bad dream. I dreamed about her again. The little girl from Miller's Creek. Tell me about her. So he did. He told Clara about Emma's red hair and freckles, about the doll she'd been clutching when he first entered that burning house, about her screams as the stairs collapsed between them. I've been carrying her for 10 years. Samuel said, his voice breaking. And I don't know how to let her go. Clara took his scarred hand and pressed it to her heart. You don't have to let her go. You just have to stop punishing yourself for not being able to save her. She met his eyes in the darkness. You tried, Samuel. You almost died trying. That matters. That has to matter. Does it? She's still dead. And you're still alive. You're alive and you're doing good and you're making a difference. Clara squeezed his hand. Maybe that's not enough to balance the scales. Maybe nothing ever will be. But it's something. And I think Emma, wherever she is, would rather you live a full life than spend the rest of your days drowning in guilt. Samuel was quiet for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. I'll try, he said. For you. For her. I'll try. It wasn't a cure. The guilt didn't vanish overnight, and the nightmares didn't stop completely. But something shifted after that conversation. Some weight that Samuel had been carrying finally began to lighten. He started visiting Miller's Creek in the spring. Clara went with him, holding his hand as they stood before 3 simple graves in the town cemetery. A mother, a son, a daughter. Emma's headstone was smaller than the others, barely visible beneath a carpet of wildflowers. I'm sorry. Samuel set his voice thick. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the chance I was given. Clara laid flowers on each grave. Then they stood together in silence, 2 survivors honoring the dead. When they finally turned to leave, Samuel's step was lighter. The new barn was finished by summer. It was bigger than the old one, with room for more horses and a loft that Samuel had designed himself. The whole town turned out for the barn, raising a community effort that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. Never thought I'd see the day, Margaret Hayes remarked to Clara as they watched the men work. Samuel Thornton, surrounded by neighbors, actually smiling. People change, Clara said, when they're given the chance. I suppose they do. Margaret paused, then added quietly, You've been good for him. Good for this whole town, really. Made us remember what it means to look past the surface. Clara thought about that as she watched Samuel directing the work, his scarred arms bare in the summer heat, his laughter mixing with the others. He'd been so afraid for so long of letting anyone see what he really was. Now he stood in the sunlight, hiding nothing, and the world hadn't ended. It had begun. That night, after the last of the neighbors had gone home, and the new barn stood proud against the starlit sky, Samuel found Clara on the porch. It's beautiful, she said as he settled beside her. It's a barn. It's more than that. She leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. It's proof. Proof that things can be rebuilt. That something destroyed doesn't have to stay destroyed. Samuel's arm came around her, pulling her close. You're talking about more than the barn. Maybe. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the warm summer air. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the horses in the new barn shifted restlessly. Clara. Samuel's voice was soft. There's something I need to tell you. She looked up at him, her heart quickening at the serious note in his tone. What is it? I went to see Dr. Whitmore today, about something I've been noticing. Fear spiked through her. Samuel, are you sick? Is something wrong? No, no. He squeezed her reassuringly. Nothing like that. It's just... He took a breath. The nightmares. They've been getting less frequent, less intense. The doctor says it's normal, says that sometimes when people finally feel safe, their minds start to heal. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Samuel, that's wonderful. There's more. His hand moved to rest on her stomach, a gesture that had become familiar in recent weeks. He also confirmed something else, something we've been wondering about. Clara's breath caught. They'd suspected for nearly a month now the missed cycles, the morning sickness, the way her body had been changing in subtle but unmistakable ways. He's sure? She whispered. He's sure. Samuel's voice cracked with emotion. Clara, we're going to have a baby. She'd known. Deep down, she'd known for weeks. But hearing him say it, seeing the wonder and joy and fear all tangled together in his expression, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. A baby. She repeated, her hand covering his on her stomach. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of his scars. I'm terrified and ecstatic and overwhelmed and so incredibly grateful. A year ago, I was ready to die in a blizzard. And now I have everything I never dared to hope for. A home, a husband who loves me, a child on the way. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Samuel, do you know what you've given me? I could ask you the same question. His forehead pressed against hers. You gave me back my life, Clara. You gave me a reason to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop believing I didn't deserve to exist. You always deserved to exist. Maybe. But I didn't believe it until you. His hands cradled her face. You're the miracle, Clara. Not me. You. They held each other in the summer darkness, two broken people who'd somehow become whole together, waiting for the new life that would complete their healing. Their daughter was born the following March, on a night when late snow fell gently outside the cabin windows. Samuel paced the floor while Dr. Whitmore attended to Clara, his scarred hands clenching and unclenching with every cry of pain that came from the bedroom. Sheriff Dalton had come to keep him company, but even the older man's steady presence couldn't calm Samuel's nerves. She'll be fine, Dalton kept saying. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. That doesn't make it less terrifying. No, it doesn't. When the baby's first cry finally pierced the night, Samuel nearly broke down the bedroom door in his haste to reach Clara's side. He found her propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in the blanket Eleanor had sent from Boston. Samuel. Clara's voice was weak but full of joy. Come meet your daughter. He approached the bed like a man walking on sacred ground. Clara shifted the bundle so he could see the tiny face within, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. She's beautiful, he breathed. She has your eyes. Samuel looked closer and saw that it was true. The baby's eyes, still hazy with newborn unfocus, were pale blue, the same striking shade as his own. What should we call her? Clara asked. Samuel thought about it. Thought about the past year, the journey that had brought them here, the people who'd helped them along the way. Emma, he said quietly, if that's all right with you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Emma Thornton, it's perfect. Samuel reached out with one scarred finger to touch his daughter's tiny hand. She grasped it immediately, her minuscule fingers wrapping around his with surprising strength. Hello, Emma, he whispered. I'm your father. I know I look a little scary, but I promise I will never let anything hurt you. I will protect you with everything I am and everything I have, and I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of you. The baby cooed as if in response. Clara laughed through her tears. I think she approves. Samuel looked at his wife, this incredible woman, who'd stumbled into his life and changed everything, and felt something he'd given up hoping for years ago. Peace. True, deep, unshakable peace. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. For everything. For staying when you should have run. For seeing me when everyone else saw a monster. For giving me this family, this life, this second chance. Clara reached up and cupped his scarred cheek. You gave me the same things. We saved each other, Samuel. That's how it works. Dr. Whitmore cleared his throat from the doorway. I hate to interrupt, but there's quite a crowd gathering outside. Seems half the town wants to meet the newest Thornton. Samuel looked at Clara, who nodded with a tired smile. Let them in, she said. Let them all in. And so they came. Margaret Hayes with a basket of food, Sheriff Dalton with a carved wooden horse, the ranch hands with flowers picked from the fields. They filled the small cabin with laughter and congratulations, passing baby Emma from arm to arm like the precious gift she was. Samuel stood back and watched, marveling at the sight. A year ago, he'd been alone. A year ago, no one in this town would have come within 10 feet of him. Now they were in his home holding his daughter, treating him like he belonged. Because he did. He finally, truly did. 2 years later, on a warm summer evening, Clara found Samuel on the porch watching Emma toddle through the yard. Their daughter had grown into a spirited child, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She feared nothing, not the horses in the barn, not the coyotes that howled at night, and certainly not her scarred father, whom she adored beyond measure. "Daddy, look!" Emma held up a handful of wildflowers, her face beaming with pride. "Pretty. Very pretty, sweetheart. Are those for Mama?" "For Mama and Daddy and Baby." Clara's hand went instinctively to her swelling stomach. Their second child, a boy, Dr. Whitmore predicted would arrive before winter. "She's going to be a wonderful big sister," Clara said, settling into the chair beside Samuel. "She's wonderful at everything." Samuel's voice was soft, with paternal pride. "Gets that from you. She gets her courage from you. Her stubbornness definitely from you." Clara laughed and swatted his arm. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Emma chase fireflies as the sun sank toward the mountains. "I was thinking," Samuel said eventually, "about building an addition onto the cabin. Another bedroom, maybe 2. Room to grow." "That sounds perfect." "And I've had some inquiries about training horses. Seems word has spread that I have a way with them. Might be able to turn it into something profitable." "Samuel Thornton, horse trainer." Clara smiled. "I like it." "It's honest work. Work I can do without." He trailed off, but Clara understood. Without violence. Without hunting. Without becoming the man he used to be. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You know that, right? Every day I'm proud of who you've become." Samuel turned to look at her, his scarred face softened by the evening light. "I couldn't have done it without you. We did it together." "Together," he agreed. "Always together." Emma came running back, clutching her wilting bouquet of wildflowers. Samuel scooped her up, settling her on his lap, and she immediately began examining his scars with the casual curiosity of a child who'd never known him any other way. "Daddy's marks," she said, tracing a line across his wrist. "That's right, sweetheart. They're pretty, like stars." Samuel's breath caught. He looked at Clara, his eyes bright with emotion. "Like stars," he repeated softly. "I never thought of it that way. Children see things more clearly than we do sometimes." Clara leaned against him, her hand resting on Emma's back. "They see what's really there, not what they've been told to see." The three of them sat together as darkness fell, a family forged in fire and snow, in pain, and healing, in desperate hope and stubborn love. Behind them the cabin glowed with lamplight. Before them, the mountains rose against a sky full of emerging stars. And all around them, the land that had once been Samuel's exile had become something else entirely. Home. Clara thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, frozen, desperate, ready to die rather than return to the monster who'd claimed ownership of her life. She thought about the notice on the general store wall, the warnings she'd ignored, the gamble she'd taken on a scarred stranger with kind eyes and a broken heart. She thought about Samuel, the haunted man who'd pulled her from the snow, who'd kept his distance because he believed he was too dangerous to touch, who'd spent a decade punishing himself for a tragedy that wasn't his fault. They'd both been so broken, so convinced they didn't deserve happiness, and they'd both been wrong. "Samuel," Clara said softly, "tell me something. Anything. Are you happy?" He was quiet for a moment, holding their daughter, looking out at the land they'd built together. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said, finally echoing her words from the night they'd learned about Emma. "I spent 10 years believing I was cursed, believing I was a monster, believing the best thing I could do for the world was disappear." He turned to look at her, his pale blue eyes full of everything he'd never dared to hope for. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that scars don't make someone a monster, and mistakes don't have to define a life. You gave me a family, Clara, a home, a future." His voice cracked. "You gave me everything." Clara leaned up and kissed him soft and sweet, a promise renewed. "We gave each other everything," she corrected. "That's what love does. It doesn't just save one person, it saves everyone it touches." Emma squirmed between them, giggling at her parents' affection. "Group hug," she demanded, throwing her small arms around both their necks. Samuel laughed that full, free laugh that Clara had worked so hard to coax out of him, and pulled them both close. Above them, stars wheeled through the endless Colorado sky. Around them, the land breathed with summer warmth. And between them, a love that had been born in desperation had grown into something unshakable. Clara closed her eyes and let herself feel it all, the peace, the joy, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The scared girl who'd run from Boston was gone. The haunted man who'd hidden from the world was gone. In their place stood something new, a family built on the ashes of old pain, growing stronger with every passing day. And that was the truth Clara held on to as the years unfolded before them, full of challenges and triumphs, sorrows and joys, all the beautiful mess of a life truly lived. She had come to Blackwater with nothing seeking, only survival. She had found so much more. She had found love. She had found purpose. She had found the courage to fight for herself and the wisdom to let herself be fought for in return. And she had found Samuel the cowboy. Nobody dared to touch the man with scars that told a story of survival. The husband and father who proved every single day that second chances weren't just possible. They were real. They were here. And they were forever.